Okay, I think we are live now. So I'll just begin the session. So good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am Nikhil Sharma, and on behalf of the National Museum, I welcome all of you to our third public lecture of 2021. In our previous lecture, we explored about the story of long-distance trade and its impact on religion and polity in early historic Western Deccan. Today, we would be discussing about the importance of storytelling and games in education. We have the pleasure of being joined by Vikramjit Singh Ruprai, who is the speaker for the evening. Before we begin the lecture, let me introduce our speaker. Mr. Ruprai is an author and historian who left his 14-year-long IT career to turn into a teacher trainer and a heritage activist. He established Heritage Shala to set up heritage labs in schools where students are taught routine subjects through liberal arts and by using example from history. He is a 5 times TEDx speaker and a consultant to many government and non-government organizations. He is currently a visiting faculty member at the National Institute of Fashion Technology and the North Cap University, and in the past served as an auditor for UNESCO, Aga Khan Trust for Culture, and the Education Quality Foundation of India. Through the lecture, we will try to understand the use of storytelling and games in the past, present, and future. While talking about story as a teaching pedagogy, the lecture will emphasize on understanding the story behind any object, personality, or monument. Now I hand over this session to Vikramjit sir and request to deliver his talk. Please. Thank you.
Thank you, Nikhil, and thank you, National Museum, for such a wonderful opportunity. It's Teachers' Day, and what better to talk about education system of India. Education system of India has been wonderful for ages. I mean, we trace our history back to the Indus Valley civilization, and even before that, we had when human beings started his or her journey, the way we started communicating with each other. One of the important factors was the elements that we used, be it, so earlier probably it was just the sign language, or we were just trying to make some sounds to make ourselves understand to each other. Eventually, we started painting on walls of caves that we were living in. So we have got all those cave paintings, and later we had got petroglyphs and geoglyphs. We started making small objects through which we were able to communicate. Everything tells a story. We reached the time of Indus Valley civilization, although in today's time, we are not able to read the script that they had. But still, when you look at those objects, when you look at those symbols, the first thing that comes to your mind is that there is something very deep behind this object. And there is a sense of, trying to decipher it, trying to understand it, trying to get deep into it. So the thing that I do with my students, wherever I teach, whether I'm training teachers or I'm interacting with students at some university or maybe even at school level, when I bring some object to them, I don't tell them the story behind that object. I don't explain that object to them. For example, there is this one case where I brought this, we use the image of the dancing girl of Mohenjo-daro. Now, when I place that image on my screen, my entire class, this was class 6 kids, and I asked them, okay, what do you think this is? Now, I knew that till now in their curriculum, they have not studied the dancing girl of Mohenjo-daro. So I asked them what this is and what do you think? They said, okay, this is some sort of statue. So I asked them to name that statue. Interestingly, not even a single child came up with the name, the dancing girl. The way kids look at things is totally different. When a child is born, we don't start with A for apple, B for boy. No. What we do is mama, papa, baba, baba, ba, la, 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 ta, ta, ta. We make these kind of sounds. And then all of a sudden, when the child gets into school, we are like A for apple, B for ball, C for cat. You start with this story. This sudden shift, sometimes children are not able to take it very easily. There are many such cases and there are many such studies to prove that. So what would help? I used to be an IT guy, and there was a point in my life where I decided to study, or rather explore, Delhi's heritage. So I stepped out of my office. I started exploring Delhi, and I thought that maybe 3 or 4 Sundays, and I'll see every monument that is there in Delhi. I divided my entire route into 4 zones: north, south, east, west. I'll explore Delhi. Done. It's easy job. 4 Sundays, 2-3 hours each. When I have to go to the west side, south side, west and south combined, there is just Qutub Minar, nothing else. And then I had what? Red Fort, Humayun's Tomb, India Gate, Safdarjung, Jantar Mantar, maybe 1 or 2 more, and that's it. But when I started exploring, it took me 1 year just to finish one area, which is Mehrauli, where the Qutub complex itself contains so many monuments. It has been 12 years now, and I still don't claim that I have studied all monuments of Delhi, because every single monument has so many stories to tell. While I was studying this, I started thinking that we have so many colleges, so many madrasas, so many gurukuls and ashrams. How were we teaching back then? Because today I don't know anything about these structures, and I consider myself as well-read, well-educated, and I have been throughout my life not exposed to all this. So was the same case back in those days also when these structures were being built? What happened to structures before these structures came into existence? So I started studying India's ancient education system. To my surprise, it was deep rooted into a project-based approach, and storytelling formed the core of it. So I thought, okay, why shouldn't I take that idea to general masses? I realized that Delhiites are not interested in exploring the history of Delhi, though now my domain has expanded. Now I don't talk about Delhi only. I talk about entire India, sometimes entire South Asia, because the culture is in a way connected. But when I started 12 years back, I thought, okay, why not I gather a group of Delhiites and talk to them about their own city. So I got everybody, okay, come, I'll talk to you. I'll tell you the history of Delhi. And they were like, history? No way. We hate history. History is the most boring subject. How dare you even say us, you're calling us for a history lecture? Come on. This thing repeated when I went to schools. It was a little later when I started going to schools and talking to kids. And whenever I stood in any class, the first reaction, if I ever asked them who likes history, eyes would pop out. History, the most boring subject. No, we don't like history. We hate history. So I started trying some experiments. I did some storytelling sessions, and it turned out that history is not that boring. Let me try a little experiment with you also. So what I'm going to do is a very small snippet of history, very small snippet. I'll give it to you, and I'll give it in Hindi. Let's see if you enjoy that or not. So here it goes. सिंहासन हिल उठे, सिंहासन हिल उठे, राजवंशों ने भ्रट्टी तानी थी, बूढ़े भारत में आई फिर से नई जवानी थी, चमक उठी सन 57 में वह तलवार पुरानी थी, दूर फिरंगी को करने की सबने मन में ठानी थी, बुंदेले हर बोलों के मुंह हमने सुनी कहानी थी, खूब लड़ी मर्दानी वो तो झांसी वाली रानी थी. हम बचपन से कविता सुनते आए हैं. ये कविता हमें उतनी बोरिंग नहीं लगती है. This poem is still kind of interesting. And when I take history like this, everything changes. Everybody says, yeah, this is something. So I thought, why not I change the way I'm telling history? So I tried something like this. चलो किस्सा नया सुनाता हूं, तुम्हें भारत माँ से मिलाता हूं, जिस धरती को जन्नत माना आज उसका रूप दिखाता हूं. एक बस्ती छोटी मोटी सी जो दरिया किनारे शुरू हुई, वो बढ़ती 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 गई, वो सभ्यता में बदल गई, ये सभ्यताओं की सभ्यता, ये भारत का प्रारंभ था, ये सिंधु नदी के घाटों पे नई मानवता का आरंभ था. बस्तियां तो बहुत हुई इससे पहले और आगे भी, पर इसकी बात निराली थी. ये वक्त बदलने वाली थी. यहाँ लिपि थी, यहाँ भाषा थी, यहाँ रिश्तों की परिभाषा थी, यहाँ नदियां थी, यहाँ नाले थे, यहाँ हर घर में शौचालय थे. राखी गढ़ी की गलियों से हड़प्पा की सड़कों तक, कांस्य युग के आविष्कार और पाकशाला के तड़कों तक, हर दिन नया रंग लाता था, हर शाम सुहानी जाती थी. इसके नगरों की भव्यता नए कीर्तिमान बनाती थी. फिर वैदिक काल प्रारंभ हुआ और ज्ञान प्रवाह आरंभ हुआ, and it goes on and on and on. But the idea here is that when I started talking to students and teachers and other people like this, everybody enjoyed. Everybody is like, yeah, give us more. I've written many poems on different parts of India, different cities. And then what I started thinking was, when we're teaching history, we're telling stories. When I'm doing my poetry, or otherwise also when I'm doing even in prose or in general storytelling sessions, that's again, I'm just telling the history, again, a story form. Then how come the history that is being taught in schools is not that interesting, but the history that I'm telling, be it poetry or be it a simple storytelling or simple talking that I'm, the way I'm doing right now, that becomes so interesting for everybody. And that's when I realized one very interesting thing. And this pattern I've seen all over the world. You pick up German history, you pick up French, you pick up Russian, American, whatever country you like, just pick up their history and see how history has evolved. Instead of history, try to get into historiography. One common thing that you will find is some person came and wrote a story that this is what happened. Some other group came in and said, no, this is not how we narrate it. We want this thing to be changed. Some other group came that, no, this fact is not correct according to our belief. We want this fact change. Eventually what happened, most of the stories or most of the narratives, what build up to some sort of conclusion or some event, were all diluted, and what remained there was dates and names. And dates and names is what bothers our kids most. That's how history became boring. And when I looked at physics, chemistry, maths, this is exactly what happened everywhere. Because practically all we were teaching, and we still are teaching, is history. So Newton, dead. Einstein, dead. Pythagoras, dead. All these people have died. They are all history. And whatever we are teaching in the classroom is nothing but history. And history is already boring. So how do you expect a child to enjoy that lesson that is happening in class? Well, there is still a way. And many teachers are also using it. The way that was used in universities like Takshila and Nalanda, the way that was used much later also. Earlier, we had books like Panchtantra, Singhasan Battis, these are not comic books. Yes, these days they come to us as comics or maybe TV serials or strips or animations. But back then, these were the textbooks. When, these books were used to teach something, teach wisdom, impart knowledge. Eventually, all that was gone. When I tried to study the liberal arts concept, I went to the, I tried to study the Hellenistic Greece education system, which came in with the influence of Romans. Over there, one thing that surprised me was that till the age of 8 or 9, a child will not go to school. And that was the same case that we had in Indian ashrams and gurukuls also. So for first 9 years or maybe 10 years, the education that you are getting is basically moral values from your own parents, your relatives. So you get to learn how to live in a society, how to function in a society. Once you are accustomed to that, once you are experienced in all those etiquettes, your culture, the family values are there, that's when you go to school. And first 5, 7, 8 years are just 3 subjects. So according to liberal arts, it's trivium and quadrivium. The trivium, where you are taught rhetoric, logic, and a little bit of arithmetic. So logic and rhetoric form the base, the foundation, where you have to stand up and you have to make a point and you have to prove yourself, which means you have to do a lot of study. So research-based methodology was there. And then how to prove your point. First, you need to be convinced whether you are right or not. So those elements came into existence. And basically that is how our students back then were being shaped up. Industrial revolution came, things changed. We needed more skill-based labor than people who could think. So everything turned to technical arts, which has been going on quite well. One interesting thing that I realized recently in last 4 or 5 years is that people have been trying to move back to that old system, and storytelling has been getting deep into, and sometimes we don't even realize that we are using storytelling to teach. For example, if I say gravity and if I say Newton and gravity, if I use these 2 words together, the first thing that will come to the mind of most of people would be an apple, because we know the story that apple fell on the head of Newton and that's how he discovered gravity. Well, now that's a memory marker. That's how the story goes. And that's why we remember it. So whenever there is a story, whenever someone starts telling you something, dopamine, this a very interesting hormone, which is actually a neurotransmitter. It's a messenger for the nerves. It sends messages to your body from brain to rest of the body, from rest of the body to brain. So dopamine is released into brain. And as story develops, you are more engrossed in it. You are more engaged with it. What this dopamine does, it activates many senses and your brain is more active, more receptive. You are able to think more critically. You are more receptive and your memory gets better because now you're completely engaged. Whereas in our normal classrooms, what happens is the moment bell rings, whatever book you're reading, just close that book, put it in your bag, take out a new book, open it, a new world will start. No connection with what was going on previously, no connection with what will happen after this. This a 40-minute period, out of which 5 minutes or 10 minutes will go in teacher coming, going, settle down, good morning, good evening, attendance. You effectively get what, 30 minutes or maybe 25 minutes. Doubts are coming in, homework is to be checked, 20 minutes. In 20 minutes, a teacher is supposed to teach a huge chapter or maybe a very complex concept. And a child has to be prepared that whatever he or she grasps in within those 20 minutes, that is to be done, because after these 20, 40 minutes, a new world has to start as the bell rings. Well, that's not helping. But there is a solution. The solution is if we connect all these chapters, if we connect all these subjects, if we make one topic through a story where 5 more topics can be taught within that one story, or even better, with a game. I've always known this. I've been teaching through games, but very recently I saw a very practical example or how gamification within education system can help us. This practical example was 3 days ago when my son, who's 7 years old, was giving his so midterm exams are going on in their school, more like online assessments, and the teacher was asking some mathematics questions, and my son, who was having his rough notebook, I made him carry his rough notebook while he was sitting in front of that camera, his screen, and I told him to that whenever teacher asks you a question, quickly solve that question, because it will be a simple plus minus kind of thing, and then you can give answer. So he's ready with his copy and pencil, though he was not carrying it earlier. I made him take that because it's his assessment. And then questions appeared. He just read the question, went like this, and he gave the answer. Every time correct answer. I'll be honest here. Even I took a minute to calculate that thing. Okay, this is this, 22, 40, this, then, okay, this should be the answer, but he was already ready with the answer. So I asked him that, how come you are the first Ruprai in our family who is good in mathematics? And I'm asking the 7-year-old that, how do you know mathematics? I can't do maths. I mean, I'm so poor at maths. So he told me, Papa, I watch all those number block videos, and that's what he watches all day. So that's when I realized that those number block videos have actually prepared him in such a way that when he closes his eyes, and then he actually narrated this to me, that when I close my eyes, I can see that this was the question, that 22 minus 4 and then something. I could see 22 blocks, and then 4 blocks are jumping off. The way he watches in that video, 4 blocks are jumping off. So how many blocks are left? Even now I have to think. I mean, I think it is 18. Please pardon me if it's wrong. So these many blocks are left, but he was able to do it so quickly because now he's emotionally connected to it. He's so deeply engaged in that concept that when he closes his eyes, his brain starts functioning that way. And similarly, we have so many games, we have so many activities through which we can engage students, and through one activity, we can bring in so many things. I mean, for example, if you have to teach Pythagoras theorem in your class, one easy way would be a square plus b square is equal to c square. And that's what we have been doing. Just remember it. It's a simple thing. Why do you have to even bother about it? A square plus b square is equal to c square. Pythagoras and Dawad, yaad kar lo. Now, here's another interesting thing. Where was Pythagoras born? Pythagoras was born in Greece on an island called Samos. He gave us the concept of 3D triangle. Alexander is also from Greece. Now, from records of Alexander, what I have read is that one of his favorite patties was a 3D triangle shaped patty. And that patty became popular in many parts of the world. In India, one version of that patty that we have, not the exact same thing, but a version of that patty that we have, we call it samosa. Now, Pythagoras of Samos, who gave us the concept of 3D triangle, and samosa, which is also 3D triangle in shape. Is there any connection? Maybe no, maybe yes. Let the child find out. Let him work on it. At least you have given him a memory marker. He will remember that concept forever. Here's a spoiler alert. There is no connection. At least I have not been able to find any connection between samosa and Pythagoras theorem. But let the child find it out. There are many such examples. One could be, this is something that I've tried in my class also. We pulled up a portrait of Mona Lisa on our smartboard and we started talking about it. Whether she's smiling, whether she's looking towards the left side of the class or the right side of the class. What is she thinking? General conversation, nothing to do with the topic that I was planning to teach that day. And the discussion is going on, and everybody's like, sir, I'll tell, this is, maybe she's thinking this, maybe she's thinking that. And then I was like, okay, now tell me who painted Mona Lisa? Of course, we know Leonardo da Vinci, the great painter, this and that. What brush did he use? Do you know that the brushes that were made back then, even today, many professional brushes, they were using the hair of certain animal to make those brushes. So what kind of animal will you find in that part of Europe? What kind of brush would he be using? What kind of paint would he be using? So kids would go online, do their research, come back, okay, this is the answer. Perfect. What else did Leonardo da Vinci design or paint? He's a painter, he did a lot of things, but he also invented things. He was also an inventor, not just a painter. And when he invented things, there are some concepts that he created which were never put to a proper execution. They were not properly executed, not implemented. One of them being a catapult. The catapult that Leonardo da Vinci designed is theoretically known to be the most efficient catapult because he used an elastic band and whatever concept he brought in. When the catapult comes in, depending on which class I'm talking to, I can talk about pulley, fulcrum, kinetic energy, potential energy, throughput, trajectory, projectile, and since elastic band is also used, I can talk about elastic energy. So physics of class 6 to 12 is hiding in Mona Lisa's smile. We just need to bring a little story around it and make it more interesting for the child. There is one more important thing that we need to keep in mind when we are standing in a classroom or maybe at home when we are trying to teach our kids. It's very easy to go on YouTube, or it's very easy to talk to a person like me and get some ideas. YouTube is filled with ideas, but please remember one thing. A child who's sitting in Kerala cannot be taught about snowfall. You cannot go to a remote village of Kerala and talk to a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old and explain him what a snowfall is. Similarly, you cannot go to Ladakh or Upper Himalayas and talk about air conditioners. I mean, how do you talk to a 5-year-old in Kerala and tell him that whatever is there in your refrigerator falls from sky? And how do you go to Upper Himalayas where they're already living in minus 20-degree temperature, that there is something which can make it even cooler? They would understand the concept of heater. So what I want to say is that we need to localize content. We need to localize stories. We need to localize information. One story that has been created in Europe or Russia or Australia or Africa or India, anywhere, cannot be taken to entire world just as it is. Not everybody will be able to digest it easily. Unfortunately, that is what is happening. We need to tweak it a bit. We need to make it so easy for the child that the child is able to understand. This happened with me a little while back, last month actually, 15th of August. I was called by a friend and all the children had gathered at their home and they wanted me to explain Indian independence and the period before the independence. So they wanted me to explain independence struggle to all these kids. And when I asked that the age group of the kids, my friend told me that class 5, 6. So I started thinking that how do I explain independence struggle? How do I explain them? Why did Mahatma Gandhi sit on those long fasts? Why wouldn't he eat for entire day or for rather days? Why did he have to walk all the way to do Namak Satyagraha? It was not easy because class 5 kids or maybe class 4 kids will not understand. So I got an idea. I asked them, do you have Monopoly, the game? They said, yes. Do you have a map of India? Yes. Do you have a chessboard? Yes. Perfect. Voila. Because it was a game of Monopoly, what the British played. So why don't I use Monopoly currency and the pieces from Monopoly, place them on the map of India, and it makes my life much easier. And the pieces from the chessboard, white and black, would become those characters who would lead me from 1857 to 1947. Made my life easier, and it made this whole story so interesting for kids. You know, whenever you're trying to talk to a child, especially when you're trying to impart some knowledge, one important thing that you need to keep in mind is that we are part of nature. Although whenever I say nature, I mean, if I say I'm part of nature and I say, give me a color that comes to your mind when we say nature, the first color that majority of people have given me till now is green. When we say nature, green, maybe brown also, maybe blue, the sky. So if human being is also part of nature, what color would you say? Usually brown or the skin color that comes up. But we are only skin colored on the outside. Inside we are all red. Jo dikhta hai, wo bikta hai. Whatever you see is something that you would remember. So everybody would say skin color, humans, skin color. But deep inside, it's totally different. We are part of nature. And if we are part of nature, there are 5 ways with which we can interact with the nature, our 5 senses. So while teaching, if we can somehow tap those 5 senses, if we can touch those 5 senses of the child, that learning becomes not only easy for the child, but when we are also passing information, it becomes easy for us also. But in our classrooms, what do? No e-tables are allowed. You have to sit in a very attentive position. Half of the kids are dozing off after the lunch break. So most of the senses are already gone, but the teacher has to teach because the curriculum has to be completed. We don't even realize that whether this child is in a state of mind to attend this type of complex lecture or not. And then no electronic devices are allowed. And then all of a sudden, one night, we announce that from tomorrow morning, this is your lifeline. Just carry your phones everywhere. All your classes will happen on phone. A few hours before that announcement, phones were not even allowed near anything that has to do with education all over India. And maybe many parts of the world, if not all. But overnight, we had to change. Now we are expecting that these kids should learn everything. And another big mistake that we did when we moved from offline education to online education, we only changed the medium of passing the information, which was a person standing in front of 40 kids, speaking the way I am. That moved to a camera, a mic, a screen. The rest, everything remained the same. I mean, why do you need a lunch break or a fruit break within the class? Why do you even have to maintain the timetable when the kid is sitting at home? Those who have kids know that during most of the classes, they are already eating. So we don't need a separate lunch break, but we do need breaks between their screen times. So that needs to be a different kind of break. A timetable that was being implemented when physical schools were there cannot, as it is, be replicated into what we have now, the digital space. But we did not reinvent. We just kind of adapted. So it was more of a patchwork. Now, when I start thinking about all this, the only thing that comes to my mind is this needs to be changed. But how? Games is one good idea. So whenever I do my teacher training, you know, during my teacher training, there is one activity I always do with the teachers that I'm training. I play dumb shards with them. Teaching physics and chemistry or even biology is the easiest when you are teaching through dumb charts. So this is what I do with them. You pick up a slip from the pot. That slip will contain some topic from physics or chemistry or whatever subject it is. And you have to explain that topic through science. Or maybe if we are doing Pictionary, you've got a whiteboard, you've got a marker, just draw something. You can't write it. You all know the rules of Pictionary. You all know the rules of dumb charts. So you can't tell what it is, but you have to explain. You have to, just do all those actions. Round one, if the topic is cyclotron, now how do you explain cyclotron? Well, cycle, train, do something. Because this is how kids can easily remember complex terms. In round one, once I have explained the term, round two, you cannot explain the term. You have to explain the concept. So if I have to explain gravity, what do I do? Maybe something like this, that something is falling. So what is this? The concept. These signs, now the child, because child's brain is trying to decipher whatever you are saying. The child's brain is trying to translate whatever you are saying. If I ask you which is your favorite cartoon, so I don't know what is going on these days, but back when I was a kid, one thing that I remember from my childhood is Tom and Jerry. Pink Panther cartoons. I don't know how many of you know about those. There were no dialogues. And we still remember many scenes from those. Early Mickey Mouse, no dialogues. All of Disney's early cartoons, there were no dialogues. And yet we remember them. Because actions speak louder than words. We have been saying that, but do we really believe in that? Anjali says Mr. Bean. Yeah, Mr. Bean. The series, the cartoon series, as well as the film series of Rowan Atkinson. No dialogues. So can we teach without using words? Yes, we can. Through games, through stories. Not all stories require words. Sometimes you can just enact a story. You can even do a mime in your class and things will work. You need to engage that child in a way that that child connects with that story so much. Oxytocin, another hormone that is released into brain. Empathy is generated. So if that child is able to connect with you, with the character in that story, be it Pythagoras, be it Newton, be it some other guy, the child will remember the concept for much longer period. I mean, until some other things take over and then he is more engrossed in other ideas, and this whole concept is pushed somewhere in the backside of his brain, but it will still remain there. There is another thing that wonders me, and that is that wherever you go, when you talk about education system, let me take a small unit, a classroom for 30 to 40 kids, one teacher, or maybe a school, 1,000 kids, 100 teachers, 150 teachers, 200 teachers at max. Now these 150, 200 teachers are deciding everything for those 1,000, 2,000 kids. Nobody ever goes to a child and asks that child, what do you want to study? How do you want to study? I tried this experiment and worked out very well. I know what this child should be taught. I have got the curriculum, but I'll not take it directly to the child. I'll go to them and I'll ask them, what do you want to study? How do you want to study? Achha, this you want. So sometimes they say, okay, we just want to talk about aliens. That's it. Fine, we will talk about aliens for next two weeks. But we will also do a story where one alien is talking to another alien and talking about the fuel that they will put in the rocket so they can come to the earth. And then we start discussing about the possible options of the fuel. What are biodegradable fuels? What kind of gases are available on different planets? So if the alien is coming from Mars, what kind of gases are available on Mars? And when they come to Earth, they have to go back. Is the same gas available here? Can they design their ship in such a way that they can refuel when they are on Earth? What other planets they can go on and refuel? Is that gas available on some other planet also? You see how the topic that I was actually supposed to teach comes into whatever my child is telling me he or she wants to learn. Now at least this child will own that piece of knowledge, because this child thinks that I told my teacher to teach me this and he or she is teaching me. Yes, it makes life of a teacher a little more difficult because now we have to study more. Now we have to prepare all those stories. We have to come up with new and new games. I've designed many games. When I take these games to classes, I just, place all the props on the tables and I ask kids to play. So when they ask me what to do with these things, how do we play them? I just say, I don't know. I just designed it. I don't know how to play with it. You decide. In fact, one prop is right here. Yeah. So I've got some of these blocks. These are little blocks which I use as bricks. So with resin chemical, I got these blocks made and I tell kids to make huge walls or towers with these blocks. When they do this, I use a small golf ball and I throw that ball from a ramp to this wall. And then through that, we study physics also. We see what kind of force is required, kinetic energy, potential energy, all that is calculated. And then we see whether the wall will break or not. So we divide classroom into different groups, and the group that can make stronger wall or a stronger tower will win. Now this is a matter of winning. So everybody tries their best. After a few rounds, things get clear and they realize that if they just construct a single wall, it will always break. But if they construct wall with 2 layers, it will be stronger. If they construct a wall with 2 layers with a hollow passage in between and some beams to support it, it can be even better. Or if they construct a tower, tower will break unless the tower has a hollow shaft within. And that's when I can take them to places like Kirti Stambh or Qutub Minar, where it's a huge tower, but it is hollow from inside. There is a central shaft, stairs going around, and then the outer layer. And since they have already created it and they understand that why it stands so long, nobody's going to ask me, oh, 800 years. It's standing from 800 years. Why hasn't it fallen? They know why it will not fall. Rather, they can teach me now. Excuse me. Another sense of taste required while we are learning. So bring in games, bring in activities, bring in information, and you do not have to tell the subject or the topic right away, because the child will start thinking that, oh, it's a physics. Those who don't like physics, they'll be like, I don't want to study anymore. I don't even want to be in this class. And those who like physics, they'll be like, yeah, physics class. But now your class is divided into two completely different and opposite emotional zones. So for a teacher, it becomes very difficult to handle these emotional zones. So what do? Maybe do some sort of stand-up comedy. Maybe start some story. Okay, I'll tell you something about, let's say, Einstein. When Einstein was a kid, this is what happened with his mother. They got a letter, he got expelled, this and that. Do that story. And while all these children are so engrossed, that's where you slowly start pushing in certain concepts, which you can elaborate in the next class. So in the next class, you can come with your proper white marker or smart board or whatever props you want to use. Okay, yesterday we did that story. I used this one part of the story. You know how it came into existence or what is the science behind it. So here's the formula. This is what E is equal to MC square means. But we have already given the story. So the child is now already in love with that topic. So the moment you enter the classroom, or even if you're teaching that child at home, the child will not shut himself or herself down the moment you will announce the topic. That's the power of storytelling. That's the power of gamification. Okay, we are nearing the time at which we had to end the session. So I am going to tell you one interesting story. Since it is Teachers' Day, I want to share a personal story that happened with me with one of my teachers. So something happened in class 10th, and it happened in such a way with me that I was not left with any other option. There was only one option left for me, and I was forced into that. What happened was I got a distinction in class 10th. And now the only option left for me was that I have to take science. No other option left. That's what happens when you get 80% or above. Science. So I took science, but nobody told me that the science of class 9th and 10th is nowhere closer to science of 11th and 12th. And that's where things got messed. Physics and chemistry was not my cup of tea. I realized when I got into class 11. So my parents did what any good parent in India would do. They sent me to a tuition center. Went to the tuition center, and I was always a lazy kid. So I decided that I'll go as late as I can. I'll enter the room just a minute before the door closes, and I'll find the bench in some corner of the room, and I'll just go and I'll sit there, probably doze off, finish my class, and then go home. Physics, who's going to study physics? Come on. So I went inside, and I realized that I'm not the only lazy guy in this room, and I'm not the only nalayak bacha here. Everybody's nalayak, everybody's lazy. They came early, but they started sitting from the back. They had left only the first seat for me. So I had to sit on the first bench, and I was so scared that this is the first time in my life that I'm sitting on the first bench. I'm not used to it. I'm already tired. I'm already feeling sleepy. What do I do? And that's when I saw from the open door, which was in front of me, there was a long corridor. On the other side of the corridor, there was this one room, which was a staff room. Door open. The teacher who was going to teach us that day, Dr. B.M. Dhawan, I remember his name. And he was fondly called Daddy Ji. So Daddy Ji appeared, and he started walking towards our class. And he was walking so slow that all sort of thoughts started, running in my mind. Yeah, this teacher is so slow. He's not even able to reach this classroom. How am I going to survive this class? As a kid, class 11 boy, I'm thinking all this. But Daddy Ji came to the class. He took his own sweet time. He was very old. He must be 80 plus at that time. He removed his shoes outside the room. He entered the room, folded his hands, and bowed to us. And by the time we all got up and we, started our usual anthem that children play, "Good evening, sir." We just started that, and when we saw a teacher with folded hands doing pranam, bowing down in front of 11th graders, we were in shock. How did that happen? This happened to us for the first time. And then Daddy Ji said one Sanskrit shlok, beautiful shlok, I don't remember it now. After that, what he taught that day was wonderful. I loved it. Didn't sleep in that class or any class afterwards. And when the class got over, Daddy Ji went back to his cabin. We all started. So I come from a small community called Namdhari. We are cookers, and this is the dress that we wear. White turban, usually white or light color kurta pajama. And that's what I always wear. That was my school uniform also. I've studied in community school only. And that day at tuition also, I was wearing a white turban and a white kurta. And when I was passing in front of the staff room, I still remember there were stairs near that, and I had to get down. So Daddy Ji called me, "Kaka, idhar aao." He spoke to me in Punjabi. So I went inside, touched his feet. He said, "Sit next to me." I sat there, and Daddy Ji said, "I want to say thank you to you." Now, this was the second shock of the day for me. Thank you to a student. Why would a teacher, and that to a tuition teacher, would say thank you to a student? So I said, "Sir, why are you thanking me?" Daddy Ji said, "When I was a kid, and I'm from so-and-so village in Punjab," he told me the name, I don't remember it now. He said, "When I was a kid, I was sitting there and I was crying. A person dressed up just like you came to me and asked me why I'm crying." Now, the attire that I'm in, this kind of turban, the simple kurta pajama, usually people from gurdwaras or those who run some sort of religious place, they wear this kind of dress. Though this is the traditional dress of Punjab, but so they are often called Sant Ji. So he said that a Sant Ji came to me and he asked me why I'm crying, and I told him that I have studied at class 5 or 6, and there is no school in this village beyond this class. I want to study more. So Sant Ji told me, "You are stupid, you are crying. You are going to teach foreigners also. Stop crying." And when he left, he said one more thing, that remember one thing, you do not sell education. Education is a gift. Education is an alm. विद्या का दान देना है, विद्या बेचनी नहीं है. Dr. B.M. Dhawan, who was head of Department of Chemistry in Delhi University, who was principal of one of the top colleges of Delhi University, who has taught in many foreign universities. One practice that he continued was that whenever he went inside a class, he removed his shoes outside, be it Europe, be it India, be it America. He removed his shoes outside class because he said that दान नंगे पांव दिया जाता है और सिर ढक कर दिया जाता है, और वो विद्या का दान देने आए हैं, विद्या बेचने नहीं आए. He's not here to sell. And since it's a gift, he would remove his shoes, he would cover his head in the classroom. And he also told me that whenever he sees anybody with this kind of turban and this kind of kurta pajama, he goes to that person and says thank you, because he was never able to meet that Santji again, and he just wants to make sure that his thanks reaches that person somehow. There was a level of gratitude. Few weeks later, physics class, unit test happened. Everybody got their unit test notebooks back. I didn't get it. So I asked my teacher, why is my notebook missing from the lot? She said, you have to go to the principal. So I went to principal sir's room. So to my surprise, my father was sitting there. My principal sir told my father that your son has cheated. I said, no, sir, I have not cheated. My principal sir said, Vikramjit, you have topped the class in physics. That's not possible. You have never got more than 5% of marks and you have topped the class. That's not possible. Not in your case. I said, sorry, sir, but I have not done cheating. I've studied hard. My principal, who used to be a professor of physics in Delhi University, was not ready to accept it. And that's when my father dropped a bigger bomb. My dad said, he goes to a tuition center. Now that was a deal breaker. I mean, you are telling my principal that what your teachers couldn't do, a tuition master has done. So principal sir, he said, okay, I'll take his test right now. I want to see whether he has cheated or he is really learning something interesting from whatever tuition you're talking about. So he asked me a few questions. He himself being a physics professor, he knew all that stuff. He asked me random questions. I have no idea what kind of questions or what he was thinking while he was asking those questions, but I was able to give all those answers. And after a few minutes, he asked me one question which still, sounds in my ear, and I don't know how he concluded that. He said, Vikramjit, by any chance, are you studying from Daddy Ji? Yes, I am. My tuition teacher is called Daddy Ji. His nickname is Daddy Ji. My principal sir got up from his chair, walked all across his table, came to me, held me from my shoulder and said, can you please take me to Daddy Ji? I want to meet him. How do you know Daddy Ji? My principal sir, Mr. S.B. Singh, said, when I was a kid, I was studying in Delhi University. He was my principal. I am whatever I am because of him. My thank you is pending. I want to go back and I want to thank him. I've been teaching in this school because I know I'm principal of this. I left my professorship and came here because I know how important this attire and people like this, because my school uniform was pagdi and kurta pajama. It still is. Principal sir said, I know how important these people are for Daddy Ji. This was my way of thanking him. I could never meet him. We lost touch, but I want to meet him again. You could imagine what kind of celebration it would have been when Daddy Ji actually came to our school. I mean, had the president of India or US come to our school, we wouldn't have celebrated that way. It's all about gratitude. It's all about how you connect. I hope you all enjoyed this story. This is not something that I just made up for this session. This actually happened with me, which changed me, which encouraged me to eventually become a teacher in my life and pass on this message of, it's a good day that it's Teachers Day today, and I can actually tell this story, but this whole message of teaching is more important than what we are doing in our classrooms. I mean, whatever is written in books is good, fine. But if books are sufficient, then okay, I can get a book on how to fly a plane. Just give me your postal address. I'll send it to you. And a few weeks later, let's meet at Safdarjung Airport. And I'll see if you can just read a book and fly a plane. At least I won't sit in that plane. Let me tell you beforehand, I won't sit in that plane. But I want to see you flying that plane just by reading a book. Not that easy. You need experience. You need practice. You need hands-on on anything. And games are the only thing that can bring you deep into it because you would enjoy it. I have a lot more to say, but I'll give rest to my speech. And over to you guys if you have any questions or you want to share your views. So over to you. Thank you.
Yes, what a wonderful session, sir. Thank you so much. If any of the viewers has any question, like we are open for Q&A session. So if you guys want to ask anything, this is the time.
You guys can type in chat also. I can read the chat. Chalo, by the
Okay,
time,
so I have one question.
okay, sure.
I really enjoyed the session, and I would like to ask, like, have you faced any challenge or there have been any challenges while you are on a journey making learning so interactive? Like,
Well, there have been many cases where, because I do teacher training, and schools ask me, schools say that, okay, you can come and interact with children. I usually refuse. I don't interact with children because of one reason. The method, the technique that I'm bringing in, it cannot create any revolution overnight. And I'm not just a storyteller who can come and who can do a 30-minute session or a 60-minute session, grab a lot of, enjoy a lot of clap and everything, and oh, nice, and then I go home. No, I want to make a difference, for which I need to train the teachers who can conduct all this on a longer run, on daily basis. But most of the schools don't want to invest in teacher training. And if they do, they usually invest in the STEM or, the science and the technology and the engineering and opening up those science labs and everything. They want to invest in that. So that is one big challenge that I'm facing. And many people like me are facing, that we are not ready to train our teachers on these kind of concepts.
thank you, sir. And like, if we have any messages.
Oh, well, by the time messages are coming, perhaps some people are still typing. So why don't I share a very small story?
Yes, sure,
There is
sir.
this one message by Anita's Galaxy Tab S6. It says, basic introduction to any language is a must. Yes, it is must. How do you teach a language? Do I teach just one language in class, or can I teach multiple languages? So I did one experiment in one of my classes where we learned 16 languages at the same time. How we did that? We created a grid, and we took a piece of map, and geographically where all these languages are spoken, we created our own grid, and accordingly we created a sheet on which we started writing words. We divided our class into groups. Each group was responsible for one language, and every day I would give them 10 or 20 words, and they have to bring in the translations, and we would write those translations. And when we would write those translations, then we would study them. We would see what comes in. How a word changes from one geographic area to another. For example, when you look at India, now in case of India, on the west coast of India, Portuguese came in. On the east coast, the British were there in Calcutta. Goa, Daman, Diu, Portuguese are here. So Portuguese, when they brought potato to India, in Portuguese, potato is called batata. Even today, you go to Marathi belt, you go to Konkani belt, it is called batata. On the other side, when the British brought it, it became potato. And the Persianate word, which is alu, also became famous. Now, when you look at the map of Europe, Portuguese or Portugal, where it's called batata. Portugal neighbors with Spain, where it is called patata. Spain is just below France, where it's called patata. And France is just next to England. So I've taken a full circle from batata to patata to patata to potato. The word has changed. And if I can pick up certain words. Now, when I say we learned 16 languages, it's not that we learned its grammar or all those kids were able to fluently speak any of those languages. But the idea here was that they will understand the concept, how a language is developed. And the moment they understand that concept, it becomes very easy for them to learn any other language. Because now they won't just be fixated on the words that are written in the dictionary. They would try to get into the etymological roots of that word and learn and try to understand it or try to understand how. So why do we say ananas, which is a Portuguese word, rickshaw, which is a Japanese word? We say imarat in Hindi, but imarat is a Persian word or Arabic word. So how come multiple languages influence? Or in America, when they say pajama party, pajama goes from India, so from Persia via India, it goes to the American English. Pajama, jo pair se pehna jaye. So how do words move? How do languages move? How do they influence each other? All over the world, you will see that. That's how you can teach culture or language in a better way. Just an idea.
So much. So since we're also live streaming on Facebook, so we have Kasturi asking, how do you give personal attention to students?
Actually, it is not required now because the curriculum that I'm trying to teach, they have only created it. They are giving so much attention to me that I don't have to, think about, am I paying attention to this guy or to this guy? First thing is, I usually work with teams. So we create small teams within the class. And now these teams are self-sufficient to support each other. I'm only required when there is something going wrong or when I have to give them right guidance. So I can now divide my time amongst teams. We give them a project, and project is never limited to those 30-40 minutes between a bell and a bell. It is usually a 1 week or a 10-day long project. So every day I'm sitting with those kids. Every day I'm interacting with them. We are discussing about new things, and we are developing. And throughout the journey, week, 10 days, they will actually learn 3 or 4 concepts or 3 or 4 topics from their textbook only. So that's the whole idea. Thing is, we have to change the way we think as teachers. Education system will change.
Thank you so much, sir. So from our audience, like if they have come up with a question now, before we can just wind up. Okay, we have one question, sir.
What about homework? Why do you have to give homework? Now the work that this child is doing is his or her homework. Because if I have asked this child to, let's say, make a cup for me, and I want to drink coffee in that cup, in that mug, this child has no idea how a mug is made. This child has invested all his time now to find out how a mug is to be made so that it doesn't break. And when we pour hot coffee in, it doesn't just collapses. What kind of materials are available? Be it classwork, be it homework. My concept is that the person or the child should learn about ceramic or clay, how it is baked, about plastic, all these materials. But I have not asked him to study materials. All I've asked him is, I want coffee, can you get me something? And you have to make it. Let him work it out. Whether it's homework or classroom, it's up to him.
Okay, we have one more question from Kasturi. They're asking, like, is it necessary to give instant feedback?
Sometimes yes, sometimes no. It depends. So when you design some sort of activity, if you are just telling a story, you will get feedback. You don't have to give any feedback. You will get feedback. When you're designing a game or an activity, that activity cannot be a 10-minute or 20-minute thing. It has to be a slightly longer activity or a longer game, which can go deep into, which can cover multiple topics. Now for that, there is a possibility that when that child executes it, overnight the child won't learn anything, or child won't understand even the concept. It can take a few days. For example, I have this small game that I have. It's called the Princely States of British India. So I've designed this card game. This card game contains 85 princely states of the British India, which had 11 or more gun salutes. But when I'm using these cards to teach, I'm teaching mathematics through these cards. I'm teaching English through these cards. Whereas this game is based on history. All the history of those areas, princely states is in this. But why I'm not teaching history through this is because the moment they start traveling, they go to any part of India. You know, like I've got Bilaspur, I've got Kishangarh, Jaipur, Dharandhara, Tonk, or Devas, Palanpur, Banswara. Now these days these are towns in India. So when they go there, they will realize, oh, we have seen this card. So actually this is the city which used to be an empire or a state or a kingdom. Sometimes the message is not required overnight. Child will realize it a few months later or a few years later, which is completely fine. That's where the far-sightedness of the teacher comes in. So yeah. Priyansh is asking how we can balance between traditional approach and this new approach, because it is very difficult to make changes by staying in this traditional web of school as a teacher when we have others to head and limited time for syllabus completion. Well, syllabus completion is the worst thing that is happening to us. I know, because we just have to finish syllabus, and that kind of time that we get, I know I've gone deep into schools and understood. I've helped many schools create curriculum, so I understand what kind of problems come. So overnight you cannot change. It can take a few years, but someone will have to start from somewhere. So my answer to that, and I'll plug in Nazia's question in the same: have you applied this gamiology or gamification in any school? Which grade? I've tried it with from classes 5 to 12 in many schools across India. I've been to Manipur, Meghalaya, Assam, Punjab, Kashmir, Tamil Nadu, Kerala, many schools in UP and Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan. So I've been doing this all over India. So this is what I do. I just tell them that to pick, each teacher should pick at least one topic in 2 to 3 months, which is to be taught through game or a story. And after 2-3 months, another topic can be picked. It will take 2 to 3 years, but eventually all your topics will convert to the method that I'm talking about. And it is not that I have invented this. This is the oldest method. In between, we deviated from the path. We went into the education system that we now call our modern education system. But now we need to go back to the ancient education system. Overnight, you cannot change. So please, topic by topic, chapter by chapter, subject by subject, start coming towards this. It will make your life easier eventually. If you plan to stay in this profession for, let's say, more than 2 years or 3 years, then you should start changing right now. What would be your suggestion to museum educators and teachers in making learning accessible to all? What are your views on using museum objects as primary sources? Well, the first thing that I would do, which I'm also planning to do with National Museum, once again, I've done 1 or 2 sessions earlier, though not tied up with the education department. But then when I brought a small group of people, my students in the museum, I took them in a hall and I asked them to give me stories or to explain me whatever they see. Now, in many places, we don't have detailed narratives or detailed story behind that object. So while standing in the gallery of Indus Valley, where they were looking at those pots, all those marks that were there, they had no idea what this is. And now they are making up stories over there. And while they are doing it, some of them would click some right notes and some of them would just fancy some random ideas, which is also good. Now, once they are deeply involved in it, that's when I'll start telling, no, this part is right, but this part I don't think would have happened. So we'll have that debate. So my recommendation to museums is that pick an object, don't explain that object to any child. Let the child explain collectively, let them fight over it, let them shout over it, explain it to you. And once they are deep into that story, that's where you start bringing in the correct narratives one by one, slowly, and not as a lecture. That's what makes difference. What about physical education? Oh, that's the easiest. I mean, I can bounce off a ball and my entire physics. There are 2 movies already. I think one movie is Hitchki, if I'm not wrong. Entire physics can be taught through just a basketball court and many other games. Shivaji, there was this one thing famous for Shivaji. He used to make his battle strategies using a chessboard. So every single game that we have is good enough to teach you so many other things. So why not?
Thank you so much. So I guess this brings us to the end of this session. Now, I would like to thank you, sir, for delivering this in public lecture. And it was a very great session emphasizing on how storytelling and like through museum objects can enhance a classroom session. But before I wind up, I am pleased to share that National Museum is now open for public. So please do visit National Museum, but do ensure that you maintain COVID guidelines to have a safe visit. So I would also like to inform our viewers that our next public lecture will be on women Bhakti saints of South India. We would be sharing the details on our social media pages soon. If you have not followed us yet, please do follow us. I once again thank our speaker and our audience for your time and for being part of this live session. And have a very good evening. Thank you so much. Thank you.